Well boys, it's time for a long video about a Wayfinder. Wayfinder is coming soon, like 15th of August, so we need to be prepared, we need to, have all this information. That's why I delivered the good video about Wayfinder like a few days ago, but today we will watch the Force Gaming. Chris is delivering good content. As always, this video is like 4 months ago, but this is most detailed, most profound video about the Wayfinder with the gameplay, with L mechanics and with everything. So today, guys, we're watching Force Gaming and you will understand what is this game about, are we playing it or not, is it worth your time or not, because it's not much MMORPG things around the corner right now, so maybe light MMO like the Wayfinder could work. Subscribe to his channel because he's doing great videos. My name is PLK, for sure subscribe to my channel as well, and let's go. The long video, long one. Have your drink, snacks, let's go.
What if you took the gameplay loop, grinding, character, and progression systems of Warframe, combined that with some MMO-light open zone elements of, say, something like Destiny, and topped it all off with the visual stylings of games like WildStar, Fable, or World of Warcraft? Well, Wayfinder is what you would get, and that, more or less in an oversimplified nutshell, is exactly what this game is. Now, last week, I got the chance to go hands-on with Wayfinder, playing roughly 25 hours.
Yeah, I also played that, but they not allow you to share the things that they don't want to share. So that's why some streamers have allowance to do that, and well, that's why we're watching his gameplay
Of this upcoming action combat character-based MMO, and I've come away mostly impressed. Beyond a few notable issues with performance, concerns.
Now, before we go further, I can say that I liked the experience. It was interesting and fast, a little bit new, which is good. It was like Destiny 2 in the World of Warcraft setup, something like that. A little bit too light for myself because, this open world, it was not open at all, just like huge corridors of some gameplay between your dungeons, but dungeons were interesting. So I really like the approach of the Chris. Maybe he will show what's good in the game, because for me, as I told you, was a little bit too light. It is not MMORPG at all for me at that time. We will see.
About the overall scope of the game, and a gameplay loop that likely won't resonate with everyone. You better like procedural dungeon grinding. Fortunately, I do, and thanks to a really well executed combat system that feels fun to play, along with what looks to be thus far some great encounter variety and design, I've enjoyed just about every minute of my time with Wayfinder. In fact, I
will not say that I enjoyed every minute. I say that it was fun at the beginning, and then I was a little bit bored because I didn't understand what's the end game, why I do that, like what will be next, right? Maybe
found that the more I kept playing the game, the more I was enjoying it and wanted to just keep on playing, which is a really good sign in my book, as I tend to feel so many games start to lose their luster around the 15 to 20 hour mark, but I have come away just enjoying the
come on, for me it's like 2 hours.
Game more and more. So today I want to talk with you about Wayfinder. I want to talk about its structure, the various systems and mechanics, what there is to do in the game, like what you can expect in any given session, and then also go over some of what I think they are doing right and what could use some improvement based on my time with it so far. First of all, let's briefly touch on this genre thing. So they are calling Wayfinder an MMO, and it is an MMO in the same way some might consider Destiny or Warframe an MMO. Personally, I would classify this as a shared world game, or MMO Lite gets used sometimes as well. Don't come to Wayfinder thinking you're getting an experience similar to World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah, so that's the thing. That will be the game why we wait for something, right?
Or Guild Wars 2, it is not that kind of a game. Wayfinder isn't made up of like massive continents that are broken up into large zones that you can seamlessly explore with like tens or hundreds of other players potentially running around. No, its structure is a lot more like a smaller scale fantasy version of Destiny. Basically, the game is broken up into two main parts, the overland open zone areas, of which there are just a couple, and then the instanced dungeons where you are likely to be spending most of your time. In the open world,
which is okay, as Chris said, dungeons is okay if the procedural generation is good, if the progression is good, if the loot system is good, if you want to go there, you know, to do this stuff, but not isometric like in Diablo 4, because it's not mine. I'm more like this one, the third person. So if you have a progression of the skills, the combat system, of the loot system, and you have, you know, why you grind, maybe it's good.
You will be seeing a handful of other players at a time. Dungeons will include groups of up to 3, and you'll see the highest concentration of other people, I think around like 20 or 30 maybe, in the game's major towns. But call it whatever you like, honestly, it doesn't really matter. I just kind of wanted to set expectations for what sort of a multiplayer shared world game Wayfinder is. And speaking of which, let's get into it. What's
up with my light? What's happening? 1 second. Yeah. This is better. Sorry.
Wayfinder like. So things start out with you playing through a brief tutorial. You will pick a starting character, not class, by the way.
I remember 3, like tank, the like ranger, and not engineer, right? And role.
Are going with the Warframe route here, where you play as a.
And yeah, I just like, I saw this location and I remember the lags and disconnects, they were pretty high. That's why maybe I was bored a little bit, because, you know, the experience overall. But the developers are working together with the guys from the Warframe, so they can solve it easily. I like 100% believe in that.
A pre-established character that has a set identity, a name, a personality, and then its own unique traits and skills. Much of what they're doing actually with the design and structure of this game aligns very much so with Warframe, which will become more evident as we go along here. So you pick a character, then you get introduced to the basics of movement and combat. This is an action combat game through and through, with everything you might expect it to have. There are light and heavy attacks, combos where you can chain or alternate between those, and then there's things like jumping and dashing attacks. There is blocking and dodging. Although it's not as deep of a melee combat system as, say, Souls games, with all of the attacks, combos, and then contextual variations.
That's the thing. It's a little bit too light for me, obviously. Like, you want something, if it's so simple, you want some progression in the leveling, like, you know, abilities like in World of Warcraft. But it looks like it will not have it. It looks like it will be more like, I mean, Remnant 2, but with melee, right? Something like that.
That those have. Wayfinder does at least cover most of the basics, and the combat in general, it all feels really good. So after the tutorial, you are brought into the first.
But look at that. I mean, look at that.
Combat in general, it all feels really good. So after the
graphics. I mean, it's like World of Warcraft on the new engine. It looks good. It looks and feels pretty good.
Tutorial, you are brought into the first major town. This is called Skylight. This is where you're going to pick up a lot of your main and side quests, along with having access to a bunch of different vendors, as well as crafting stations. We'll get into that stuff later, but I just want to say outright how much I was like immediately impressed with the appearance of this game. Visually, the town's look and design reminds me of a combination of World of Warcraft and WildStar. The buildings and the setting have this real strong Nordic vibe, along with everything being ridiculously oversized, that really reminded me of WoW's Wrath of the Lich King expansion in particular. Like, it all feels very reminiscent of various areas and towns within the Howling Fjord specifically, and I just absolutely love it. Cool. But then there's also this like mix of the funky sci-fi tech of WildStar in parts of.
You know what? It looks like Core Punk. You know, this MMORPG. It is MMORPG, isometric one like Albion Online, which is. It looks like that. It really like feels like
The
that.
city, like in the crafting station areas, you've got all these neon signs and flashing lights, kind of like funky looking. I don't know. I just think this game looks real good aesthetically. I know it might be a little cartoonish for some people, but I personally find it very appealing, and I definitely think it is one of Wayfinder's strong suits. On several occasions while playing the game, I would just go, damn, this all looks real good. So when you first arrive in town, the game takes you through on a series of quests, walking you through the different major areas, introducing you to the NPCs and stations. And then you go on a brief romp through your very first Lost Zone mini dungeon. You clear a few rooms, fight back a large wave of enemies, finish the dungeon, and then
I'm sorry. I need to close all my chats. You know.
they set you off into the first open zone area. So let's talk a little bit about the open world in Wayfinder.
Oh yeah, here. Okay,
And
these
of
are the
course,
behemoths. Look at them.
The
The bear.
advertisement.
You see
Please subscribe to my channel. I need money for YouTube Premium. Please.
All throughout your time playing this game, you will regularly be directed to these open zones, either through a main story quest, some side mission that you pick up, or just because there are things that you want to do or farm in these areas. I would say
Okay.
that the open areas are decently sized and fully open to seamlessly explore once you initially load.
I mean, I don't know, but for me it feels they're really opened, fully opened, and you can do whatever you want there, but they are like just a walk through, you know? Like corridor where you go and you can see all this open worldiness, but you don't need that.
Load in. The open zone that you were first introduced to is called the Highlands, and it's basically like this fantasy woodlands area. So what things are there to do in the open world? Well, you'll go around exploring different points of interest. There's lots of really cool bespoke areas to see here. There's things like the Pit and the Crossroads Foundry, the Bloodworks, Ironstone Keep, Lower Skylight, a lot of highlights, a lot of areas to see. And then all throughout, you will of course come across plenty of enemies to fight. You're going to see things like goblins and bandits. There are mutants and various elementals, as well as wildlife like bears and deer and things along those lines. And every single enemy has a set level. So when you first start out, there'll be some safe spots for you to explore where everything is around your level, but then you will come across places that are too dangerous because the enemies are way stronger than you. Now, as you play, you level up, you get stronger, and then all of a sudden those low-level enemies can be dealt with in 1 or 2 hits, and then you naturally progress to being able to access the higher level areas. But yes, it does appear like there is no scaling of enemies within the open zone area. There are public events to do scattered all throughout. There will be small ones, like you'll come across these locked chests that can only be opened once you kill all of.
Yeah, that's the thing. If they will do the exploration of these open zones interesting, like you can find random chests, which is valuable, not just some gold shit and that's all, but which are really valuable, some kind of treasure, some kind of crafting materials. And you know, you have to go on exploration, you have to find some things, you have to fight these mini bosses to get this loot. Maybe it's interesting. It's like other type of grind, not just all dungeons, right?
Of the enemies surrounding it, and those enemies will also have chains wrapped around them, which I thought was a neat little touch. Then there are much larger difficult events, like say the summoning rituals, where you
Yeah, I saw the events. It's like something happening, you come and you have a waves of enemies, you have some, like, you know, missions to do, which is also the small thing to overcome and a little bit of fun to do between dungeons, which is good.
have to eliminate the summoner goblins and a few of their minions before a timer runs out. You'll also encounter these portals where creatures will spawn in from other dimensions. And there's a variety of other just open world events that you'll come across, including some massive world bosses that will roam around in particular areas. You will pick up side quests from the various NPCs found in town, as well as some open world quest hubs that are found in the world. Also, some objects found in the world will grant you side quests, and these ask you to do the typical RPG side questing fare: collect some items, eliminate targets, gather resources. There are also a variety of collectibles and resources to pick up, so you'll find ore nodes scattered all around. You hit these, they automatically vacuum up. There will be chests that have loot in them. Some of these will be obvious, others are hidden or even buried. Like, you'll find locations where there's some rubble and debris on the ground, and then by interacting with it, the chest will reveal, or sometimes enemies will spawn in instead. And And then also
Okay,
there
cool.
are these memory fragments. These are these glowing yellow orbs. You'll find these all over the place, both in the open world and in dungeons. And they're used for a lot of the game's progression systems, specifically for unlocking new weapon masteries, for crafting new wayfinders, and then
Okay, so this is the purpose on the exploration, which is good. Okay, like it.
for upgrading your echoes, which are kind of like the game's version of gems. So when I first got into the Highlands, I actually had the impression that it was kind of a small space. Like as I first
Exactly. Maybe I didn't play enough because I played like for 5 hours or something, and then was okay. Let's see when it will come off. Like because it's you don't understand is it game good or not under this short period of time. And okay, let's see what he will say to us.
ventured out and pulling up the map, it seemed like a relatively tiny area compared
Right.
to a like typical MMO open world zone. But I gotta
Exactly.
say, as I spent more time playing and exploring, I have come to find that it's all rather dense. I think this is largely due to their use of layering the environment. Like this isn't just some flat terrain for you to walk over. There are multiple levels to the entire thing. So you'll find castles and ruins, towers, hills, and rocky formations that tend to expand upwards, and then there will be tunnels, caves, and low valleys that go
Okay.
low, and even in some cases underneath parts of the map. And then lots of paths and interconnected access points between all of this. There will be lots of spots where you're actually required to do some sort of navigation on your part in order to get through. There'll be like
Okay,
jumping
cool.
puzzles to get up to
Cool.
or across an area, or you'll have to use some of the game's various traversal tools that are in the environment, which include things like zipline locations, various ladders, and even elevators. Now, I wouldn't call these open zones massive, though. In fact, just out of curiosity, I wanted to test how long it took to get from one point to the other. So I ran from the tippity top of the map, where you first spawn in at the elevator, all the way down to the southernmost point, and it clocked in at roughly 5 minutes, which even included some checking the map and getting lost briefly and having to wait for my stamina to regenerate. So the total surface area here, not
It's
exactly huge, but I will say it is designed and layered in a way that does make it feel pretty dense and interesting to explore. Also, you wouldn't ever really just run straight from one end to the other. There's no reason to. It doesn't make sense. There's no purpose behind it. Usually, when you're in the open world, you are there to do something, be that farming enemies, collecting orbs, participating in events, or doing any of your main or side quests. So just running across the map is something you'll never actually want or need to do, especially since the game has fast travel locations, these signal fires that once you unlock, you can just instantly teleport to between the zone with no loading screens. Now remember, they did go as far as to make the distinction and call this game an MMO, and as such, you will be running into other players. You'll see them engaged in combat with a pack of enemies, traversing the environment, collecting orbs, or doing any of the public events or side quests of their own, all of which, by the way, you can join up with them at any given time. The game does look to incentivize team play by having instance drops, like just being next to someone who kills an enemy or opens a chest would actually drop loot for me to collect as well, so there's no sense of competition when it comes to fighting enemies and engaging with the open world stuff.
Take 20% all the way
Man,
off during
Can you
Manscaped.
please subscribe already and like the video? You know, I need money for the YouTube Premium. You know, please.
Package full point.
Now, in terms of how many players you're going to see in the world, well, I'll tell you, the most I would ever come across at any one time, I think, was like 3 people. Although the entire zone does hold more than that, I've never actually seen large groups of players all in a single spot at any given time. They are there, but it's just you're going to occasionally run across them. There aren't really a lot of instances where they're all going to be gathered, most likely,
Cheers.
unless you are specifically coordinating gathering with the people in your particular instance. All in all, I will say I do feel like they've done a fairly solid job in executing their version of this open shared world. These areas do feel pretty enjoyable to explore. Unfortunately, there's only 2 of them. Like I said, the zone that you are initially introduced to is called the Highlands. Now, after progressing through several hours of the main story quest, along with doing a bit of grinding and leveling up, you will eventually be brought to the second zone called Reaver's Woods. This is like this snow-swept region. It is an entirely new area filled with all new things to do, new landscapes to explore, enemies to fight, and resources to collect. But from what I understand, these 2 zones are the only 2 zones that the game is planning to launch with into early access.
Really? So if the early access will be the same zones, just, you know, polished mechanics and the same dungeons, but polished dungeons, And as I understand, they're planning to have early access for 6 months. Well, I think they screwed up because people will not play it. I mean, people will try it for a week or so, then we will drop it. And for me, I never come back to the game like for a year after this fuck up. It's tricky.
And if that is true, I do feel like
I hope they will not do that.
that is far too few. I would have guessed or helped for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 zones, if not 10 or 15. But the idea that they're releasing with only 2, I think may very well leave some people feeling like there's not enough open world content. Now, at the same time, none of that may matter because the open zones, you are not going to be spending a majority of your time there.
Agreed.
Most of your time, I would guess somewhere between 70 and 80% will be in the lost zones. Now, these are instanced, procedurally structured dungeons that you will be running over and over and over again for the sake of gathering resources, currencies, and the game's loot. Like mentioned earlier, after the tutorial, you are brought through a brief, roughly 5-minute dungeon run. The main quest giver, called Omen, asks you to step into your first lost zone at the Gloom Gate, which is this massive, like, dimensional portal sitting just on the edge of town. So you spawn into these ruins and are asked to find the Codex Ember. You make your way from one hallway to the next with rooms connected in between, fighting back goblins and spiders, opening chests and collecting resources along the way. And then there is this giant purple barrier you break through with your dagger, which opens up access to some more hallways and rooms full of enemies. You keep on going until you reach the final room, which is like this wide open arena. There, a large group of enemies spawn in and an ambush. Defeating them lets you open up the Gloom Anchor, where you collect your bonus rewards, complete the dungeon, and zone out. Now, structurally, this is the basic experience of running a dungeon. It, of course, gets much more varied in layout and appearance, and there is a wide variety of different side objectives, hazards, and puzzles for you to solve, but the general flow is the same. Zone in, move through the dungeon, navigating hallways, rooms, and some bespoke areas here and there, all placed and laid out in a procedural fashion until you finally make your way to this final room where you fight back an ambush or a boss, and then the dungeon is complete. Now, to help keep things fresh though, the game has multiple zones or locations or tile sets, if you want to call it, where these dungeons take place. And this adds a lot of variety to how the dungeons look, to the things that you'll encounter, and even the enemies that you will fight. This isn't just a coat of paint either. Each dungeon location is rather distinct in not only its appearance, but also the structure and layout and design of the rooms that you move through. So after that initial mini dungeon, you're brought out into the open world and you have to complete a few tasks, and then you're asked to find the entrance to what's called the Codex Halls. Now, this is an actual physical location in the Highlands open zone. So you'll have to go there in order to gain access. You'll make your way over. Maybe you'll do some of the open world activities that we talked about earlier while en route. And then once you arrive, you go through, you complete the dungeon, at which point the Codex Halls then becomes available as a new option to open up and run from within town at that big portal called the Gloom Anchor. And that is how the sort of main story progression is tied into the dungeon farming in this game. There will be various steps in between some of the main story quest, but essentially once you reach a dungeon and then clear it in the main story quest, that dungeon and that kind of tile set is then unlocked back in town, at which point you can just keep running it over and over and over again, and it'll all be slightly different each time thanks to how this whole procedural placement of rooms works. Which, if you're wondering, structurally it's more or less like a variation in the combination of rooms and then the connecting pieces. So you'll have hallways that lead into a small room maybe, and then maybe that small room has multiple hallways branching off of it in different directions. So you go down one hallway and then maybe there's a big room that has multiple levels. There could be some stuff in between that, maybe some side quest or boss or groups of enemies to fight, but then that big room also has some hallways branching off of it. Or maybe it doesn't, and then you head back in the other direction, you go down some other hallways, and maybe you find...
Yeah, so basically sometimes it was a little bit puzzled, and you know, where you have a random party, you're going somewhere and it's like the dead end, then you turn, you try to find out, and at some point you understand you need to jump up, like to do the small jumping puzzle to go forward, which is like cool. It's nothing like significant, you know, super cool, but it was pleasant experience. I was only in one dungeon, so if they have really different types of a dungeon and combat system, skill system, and loot system progression, that could be interesting. If it's only for different loot, but you will have the same skills and abilities for a long time, it will be boring.
Find a room
And they don't have PvP.
with a puzzle, and then maybe you have to go back to the main area, or maybe that puzzle room now has a branching path leading you further and deeper into the dungeon, and then maybe you come across a little event, and maybe you find a room with a side quest and NPCs. There's so many possibilities because they just basically take this entire collection of rooms within each one of the dungeon locations, and they just piece them together differently every time you run through the dungeon. I think the best way to think of it is that every dungeon location has a set number of building blocks, and then how they're connected and laid out will change from one run to the next. You will not always be seeing the exact same rooms every single run, but yes, it is the case that as the more you play and say you keep running the codex halls over and over and over again, you're going to keep seeing the same room types. They will just be presented in a different fashion, but it will get repetitive because that is simply how this sort of procedural dungeon structure works in these kind of a game. But again, each dungeon location has its own separate building blocks. So in total, the build that I played had 9 base dungeon locations. The first one you unlocked was the Codex Halls. You kept on playing. Eventually, you unlocked the Undercroft as well as the Repository. And then there were 3 separate mine locations, each which had a different layout and look to them. And there are 3 additional locations within the Reaver Woods, which is that second kind of snow-themed zones. So there are 9 dungeon stylings, more or less, each with their own distinct bespoke layout and presentation and enemies and things and puzzles to do within them, which all combine.
And I assume they scale, right? So like the first dungeons that you enter first, this, I don't know, the codex thing, right? You can still will be the high level and go the same with the scaled monsters. I assume it's like that. Otherwise, it's like just useless all the time. So that could be interesting. Like 9 dungeons types, procedural generated, which is okay. If they will do have like 30 overall, it already could be interesting. And you have different type of loot dropped from different dungeons, so you will not go one only, and you need to collect all different things from different dungeons to, you know, to craft some cool weapon. I just curious, what is the end game? Like if you will kill everybody and collect all the loot and you have the top gear, and normal MMORPG, it will be PvP or raid bosses. So what is here?
Together does add a lot of variety, and there's a lot of other things to keep things fresh and mix it up further. So everything that I've been describing thus far would fall under the category of an expedition, but on top of that, every dungeon location also has hunts that you can go on, which are basically like single room boss fights. You'll have to craft a special key every time you want to go on a hunt, and then that key
okay, cool. It's like different the same stuff, but with a different approach, which
unlocks access to a fight of that particular associated boss. Then on top of that, there is the difficulty scaling. So whenever you complete successfully a...
That's good. Like if you have like, you know, easy, difficult, I mean, normal and difficult, and then you have some heroic and then a mystic, and it's really, really tough. Could be interesting.
Dungeon run, you unlock the next tier of difficulty for that dungeon. So you start off at level 1. If you do that successfully, you unlock level 2, which will scale everything up to be tankier and deal more damage. With each one of these levels, there is an associated recommended gear score, basically, and this keeps on progressing forward. I personally saw as much as 5 difficulty tiers for the dungeons, although there may be more. I'm just unsure. I simply didn't progress that far in the time that I played. Now, on top of that, there is also this imbuement system, and this adds another layer of difficulty by enhancing enemies in the dungeons with affixes. So for example, the shadow imbuement will make it so that every enemy that dies will then blow up after a few seconds. Now there are multiple elemental imbuement types, and each one of these will do something different. Adding an imbuement to your run, of course, makes everything harder because of the affix and the enhanced enemies, but then also gives you better rewards. And eventually, as you progress, you will unlock the ability to apply multiple imbuments to a single run, which also, as it turns out, is a good way to farm for unlocking the various pieces required to craft new Wayfinders, because you start the game with one and you have to make the rest very similar to how it works in Warframe. I will say, while there
Okay, so you have one character and you can open different wayfinders, or you need to start from the beginning, or how it works?
Is absolutely a lot of repetition to the process of running dungeons, since it is a large part of what you're going to be doing and what you will likely be spending most of your time for progressing your character as well as progressing your weapons. And you will be seeing the same areas over and over again, coming across the same rooms, the same hallways, the same path types, run after run after run. I do feel like the way they do procedural placement really does help mix things up and keep it varied.
Okay, cool.
That in conjunction with the fact that they've got these 9 different dungeon locations, and I assume, and as far as we know, they will be adding more of these kind of tile sets of these dungeon locations between now and release. An average dungeon run would take me somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 15 minutes, and just so you know, if you want to get a general idea for like what the flow is of any particular play session, personally I found that it would look like this. I would log in and probably run a dungeon like 2 to 3 times, and then maybe I would go on a couple of boss hunts, and then after that I would head out into the open world. I would do some side quests and events, I'd collect some things, and then I'd take all of the stuff that I gathered in that process and I would use it to level up my character, power up my gear, and start the loop over again, just continuously progressing and getting more and more powerful, leveling and getting stronger as I keep doing this loop over and over and over.
Two things. So it's basically not MMORPG. It's like Diablo but 3D, right? You just like grinding and looting. That's all. But that's okay. Like you have the find party fast thing, right? You can go with other people randomly. That's fine. The thing is, why? What is their end game? Like if it's not anything in the end game, well, I will be really disappointed.
Speaking of which, let's dive into the talk about how characters work, how the customization is, and the game's various progression systems. So as mentioned earlier,
it's important. Is it fun to progress on?
You're in Wayfinder, you are playing as a character. These are not classes like a lot of MMOs do. It is way more akin to how Warframe's frames work. Every single character has a name, they have a backstory, and they come with 4 default abilities along with a few passives. And all of these things, while they can be modified, they never completely change. Your character is your character. Your 4 default abilities are your 4 default abilities. So the game will be launching with 6 characters or Wayfinders in total. There is Wingrave, who is kind of the tank and healer hybrid. Silo, who throws a variety of bombs and can summon decoys. Nis is like a rogue character with a lot of dash attacks, dealing shadow damage. Senja is the brawler or gladiator with melee punches and grapple hooks. And then there's Kairos, the war mage, with a variety of ranged and spell attacks. The game is also launching with a 6th Wayfinder, but that has as of yet not been revealed. I think the rumor is that it is going to be another healer potentially. The character that you first select when going through the tutorial, that is the one that you will be playing for the foreseeable future. They are pretty upfront with this. They give you like a big warning after you play through the tutorial and before you finalize your decision, saying, hey, this is the character that you are going to be stuck with for the time being. Because yes, if like me, you pick Wingrave, but then decide you want to play Nis, for example, you're going to have to do some grinding because all additional characters beyond the first one you select have to be crafted. Now, crafting characters involves basically grinding for these rare materials to create 3 memories of the Wayfinder that you're wanting to play. You combine that with a little bit of gold, and that is how you unlock every additional Wayfinder beyond your first. Now, it is expected that this is going to be a bit of a grind, or very likely that you will be able to purchase the Wayfinders because this game is free to play, and they have been pretty up.
Yeah, it is. It have the founders pack for the early access. And rumors are for the next 6 months, you cannot play for free to play. You need to buy it. And then after 6 months, it will be free to play.
With the fact that they're going to be modeling the monetization after Warframe. And Warframe is a similar game where you start off with one and then everything beyond that has to be crafted, which will take some time and be a grind. Or you can choose to purchase it, which is the other option. We are assuming it is going to be exactly the same here. And I will just say, in the 25 hours that I played, I was unable to craft another Wayfinder. Now, to be fair, I wasn't particularly aiming for that. combat. I wasn't grinding specifically to unlock a particular one, but just in my casual play, I was nowhere near having the resources to craft a single additional Wayfinder. Now, the Wayfinder you pick is only one part of the equation though, because then there is the weapon system. So at the moment, there are 4 weapon types or classes in the game. There are the sword and shield, the two-handed melee weapons, the two-handed ranged weapons, and then dual daggers. So every character will start out using their signature weapon. So for me on Wingrave, I automatically had the one-handed sword and shield. Now weapons, beyond having their own particular types of attacks and combos, they also come with their own ability. So my starter sword and shield was called the Vanguard, and its ability was Power Bash, where basically I could do a shield bash for massive impact damage and guard break damage. In combat, I would build up charges, and then the more charges I have, the harder hitting it was. But what's interesting is that is just one version of the sword and shield weapon type. There are others in the game, and every single one of them come with their own unique skill. So in the build that we played, for the different weapon classes, there were 4 variations of the sword and shield, 2 variations of two-handed melee weapons, 5 ranged weapons, and 3 variations of the dual daggers. Every one of these variations has their own unique ability, so your weapons that you use aren't only like that, like sword and shield attack combos and lights and heavies, but also, depending on the one that you use, will give you a completely different 5th skill for your character. Now, they have said that
that's cool, actually. So you have 4 types of different weapons, and each different type of weapon have like 2 to 4 different types also. So it's like different skills. So it's overall like 20 plus different 5th skills, right? Which is one of the main, like ultimate or something like that. And the playstyle will a little bit vary. It's cool actually. And like if you're Wingrave, you have these 4 default skills that you have for the defense, for the healing, etc. And you can choose daggers, for example, to be the tanky, with tank with some skills for the damage. It's not so huge variety, but if they will add few new weapons, that's interesting.
This list will be expanded upon with time. I do believe by the time we get early access release, there should be even more than the ones that we saw in the build that I played. And what's even more interesting, though, is that while your character does start off with one particular weapon type, you can use any weapon in the game. Like halfway through my playtime on Wingrave, I decided to swap into using two-handed melee weapons. So I still had my 4 base abilities. They stayed the same. And I now had access to a completely new light and heavy attack chain combo, as well as all of the different attack variations, like the jumping attack and the dodging attack. But then I also had a brand new 5th ability. So the two-handed axe that I was using was called Typhoon. It's a heavy hitting weapon, deals high damage to health and resilience, and then it has this different passive system where engaging in combat builds momentum, adding additional damage to the attacks that I do. And its ability was called Shatter, where I would then consume all of my momentum and perform this strong overhead slam. And if I land a direct hit, that would sunder the target, causing them to take increased damage for 10 seconds. So the weapon system, it cannot be understated how it is almost like the other half of your character. Yes, your 4 abilities will never change for the character that you play, but there is some distinguishing of your playstyle and your build as we go into the other parts of progression. But combat changes drastically once you switch your weapons, because while I started with a sword and shield, I swapped to a two-handed axe. I could then also, if I wanted to, try the two-handed sword that's in the game, or I could try one of the 5 ranged weapons, or I could switch and try one of the 3 dual daggers. And if they can stay on top and continuously add not only new versions of these 4 weapon classes, but I want to see more weapon classes, because there's so much more than swords and shields, two-handed melee, ranged, and dual daggers that they could go with. I mean, in particular, off the top of my head, where's the caster stuff? Where are the stabs and the wands? Like that opens up a whole...
Where is the hammer, right? A huge one.
New range of possibilities, and it is really exciting, the potential here if they continue to expand on the system, but even just with the system that they currently have in place. Now, there's much more progression in the form of accessories, echoes, the affinity system, and the abilities and masteries, so let's dive into that. So first up, you've got accessories. This is essentially your gear slots in the game. You will not be finding helms and chest pieces and pants. Your Wayfinder appearance is mostly cosmetic, besides changing changing out your weapon. But the gear comes from these accessories. They're basically relics that you find. They'll drop from enemies. You'll find them in chests, but then you can also craft them. Basically, they're like stat sticks. It is a pretty straightforward system. They will have levels and come in various rarities. You will equip the best version and the highest level relic that you have that also has the particular stats that you are looking to enhance. Now, beyond the fact that every relic has a stat boost to it, they will also come in sets. So if you have 2 or 3 of these set accessories, then you get the bonuses associated with that. In addition to this, there is the Echo system. This is basically like gems. You will collect these and they provide stat boost, increasing your health, weapon, and ability damage, things like crit or other offensive and defensive stats. There are also classes of Echoes that will add an ability modifier. So some modifiers include if you use your weapon ability, you can then drop a bomb that deals magic and break damage. Or if you lose...
So, okay, now it's important. So it will be some part of the things like from the legendary items from Diablo or Path of Exile, right? You will have some random effects, or not random effects, but like triggering effects that you can use when you do some skills, when you do some weapon moves, and you can, do the build from your accessory, from your weapon. It's okay.
Half of your guard break, all of a sudden it summons a damage shield equal to 25% of your health. Or there was one that I found where any melee combo finishers, which is just basically the end of an attack chain, once you reach that, it then summons a large AoE blast. And these are just 3 examples of this class of Echoes that will modify your attacks or your abilities or give you some sort of passive enhancement. I assume there are way more beyond the 3 that I've seen. So these Echoes will be slotted onto your character, but also into your weapon and the accessories that you have, and each one of those character, weapon, and accessories will have an Echo capacity. So the Echoes themselves will have a type and rarity and level, and then also an associated cost. And the system works very similar to Warframe, where you try to match the Echo type to the proper slot on your character, weapon, or accessories, and if you do so, that will actually cut its cost in half, which then lets you fit more and more powerful Echoes in. It's just a matching game, which gives you access to more potential capacity to put more or stronger Echoes on your character. And then outside of whatever condition Echoes are found when they drop for you, they can then further be upgraded by feeding other Echoes into them, which increases their star rating, which increases their power. The other form of power progression comes through this system of affinity. Basically, there are 3 lines of affinity that you can progress down. There is instinct, discipline, and focus. Now, this progression can be done for both your character and the weapon that you're using. Each one of these categories will just enhance a particular combination of stats. So your basic stats include your max health, resilience, weapon and ability power, crit rating and power, break power, and then physical and magic defense. So depending on the character, the accessories, and the weapon that you're using, the particular combination of stats that you get from going down the instinct, discipline, and focus trees may change. At the bottom, it's just another form of power progression where you move through this, leveling it up and spending resources, which makes you stronger in whatever attributes you're looking to enhance. On top of this, there are perks that you will unlock as you progress further down each individual path, and these provide some further specialization by giving you a passive boost, enhancing your character. Now, as I talked about earlier, the abilities that you get for your characters are static. Every single Wingrave has the 4 same abilities, for example. Those are locked in and they never change. However, as you level up your character, you are granted points to enhance those abilities, but there's no choice here. There's no like branching tree. Basically, every ability has 3 tiers of upgrades, and then as you upgrade it just makes it stronger, giving it,
It's basically Destiny 2, right? But if you have at least like 1 branch, it will be really cool.
Additional percentage damage or healing or whatever, just making it better. It is a pretty bare bones system, and I'm actually a little disappointed that they haven't expanded further upon it. I don't know why there aren't at least like 8 options. Like if we can only have 4 active skills, at least have like multiple variations of those. If nothing else, what I would love to see, so that you take the 4 base abilities of my Wingrave, and then once I level it up, give it a branching path where I can change and pick from 1 of 2 options. Or maybe I keep the original core options. So maybe every ability has 3 potential variations, the core and then two alternates that then turns out to be 12 potential skills that players can choose from. But right now, if I'm Wingrave, I have 4 abilities. It's the same 4 abilities as every other Wingrave, except maybe theirs are just modified differently than mine. It's pretty bare bones, and honestly, something that I think needs to be improved. I'm astonished that this is what they're going with, but it is what it is. And then finally, for power progression, there's the mastery system. So your character is going to start out with the mastery of your weapon class.
Okay, so you have proficiency with the weapon as well. Like it's also cool. You're like more focused on some particular weapon.
It's like my Wingrave had the sword and shield mastery, but you can then unlock the other weapon class masteries by spending some memory fragments, and those were those yellow glowing orbs scattered around the game that I talked about earlier. It does look from this build like they intend at some point to add a mastery perk system, but right now nothing's in the game. That is probably just coming later in development. So that is the power progression. Now you might be wondering, well, how does visual progression work? Well, there is none, is basically how it works, or doesn't work. From what I saw, the visual appearance of your character is entirely 100% cosmetic. Like if I wanted my character's look to change, I would have to change the weapon that I'm using.
So they will sell it. It will be like, okay, they mix so many things. It will be like Fortnite. You buy cool looking suit for you, but it's cosmetic, which is okay, which is good, right? And then you have just the accessories, the weapons that you need to collect. So most likely we will grind for the accessories and for the weapon only.
Or go into the cosmetic tab and swap things around. Now, in the build that I was playing, I don't know if I had access to like a collector's edition variation of the game. I couldn't tell you, but I did have a few options to start, so I was able to change up to my appearance. At no point did I ever find or unlock any new cosmetics to swap out my character. There was no changing of my visual appearance unless I stepped into the customization tab, or like I said, unless I swapped the weapon that I was using, and I found that pretty darn disappointing. I mean, I do wish that they went with a traditional gear system for the game's power progression, because then that would give the variation of gear swapping out and changing as you find new pieces. But no, that is not what they've gone with, and visual changes do appear to be 100% cosmetic. I am, of course, hoping that by the time the game comes out, there will be cosmetics for you to unlock while playing, and it is not entirely tied to monetization. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but also it's a free-to-play game, so maybe cosmetics only change by buying new skins. I don't know yet, but in the build that I
it's not big of an issue, right? It's like Fortnite. You want to be unique, you buy stuff, you bought few unique cosmetics, and you're like running and gunning with that. That's okay. The thing is, what is the end game? He told us about the progression system and dungeon, etc. But what is the end game? Why we do that?
I never found a new cosmetic besides the ones that I started with. So there you go. Which brings us into discussion of monetization. Now, in the build that we played, there was no monetization to be seen. There was no cash shop, not even like a work in progress coming soon tab, but it is absolutely going to be there at release. Of course it is, because this is a free-to-play game, and they have explicitly said they're going to be modeling it after what Warframe does. So what is that? Well, if you're not familiar, a lot of Warframe's progression actually centers around the use of these kind of long build timers. So you'll need to construct various parts for your weapons or the frames that you want to build, and those will come with a build time. For the higher value stuff, for the better stuff, sometimes that build time can be very, very long, many hours. I mean, it's been a long time since I played, but I recall build times of over a day potentially. So you can wait that time, or by spending a little in-game currency, they let you pay real money to skip those wait timers. Now, I should say, from what I saw, there were no timers for the building, for the crafting systems in this game, but that could change because they have said they're going to be modeling after Warframe. So it's certainly possible. Now, other things that Warframe has available for sale in the cash shop include, of course, there are cosmetic skins, there are the characters or the Warframes themselves, there are weapons that you can buy, you can purchase various equipment and boosters, enhancing boosters, percentage boosters, XP boosters, currency boosters, and there are also companions available for sale. Now, because Wayfinder has said this, here's the exact quote actually, they stated that the game will be, quote, embracing the free and fair Digital Extremes monetization customization philosophy.
Fair.
Now, in terms
That's
of
okay.
Wayfinder, like I mentioned, I didn't see any build timers, but at the same time, I also couldn't find a cash shop, not even a tentative spot for the cash shop. It will be there though. At the very least, if nothing else, they will be selling skins. And like I said, the built-in cosmetic customization and progression was pretty much non-existent from what I saw. We'll have to see where all of this lands once the game officially comes out. Now, as for my overall impressions, I really like the game. And like I said, I really
Sorry. I need to... What is the fucking ad game? Why we do that? It's like, why? Not we can't do that just for the sake of the next loot, next gear progression, right?
really found that as I kept playing more, I was enjoying the game more and more, and I wanted to keep on playing.
Okay,
on the
that's
good
good.
side, I think the gameplay and combat in general feels really solid.
That's really important because combat system for the MMO genre, for RPG, action RPG genre, for all these games, combat system is most crucial. If it's fun, people will play it, right?
I absolutely love the visuals, the design, the aesthetic, the way the world is built, the overworld area, how it's structured and how it is to explore, and even the progression system I thought felt pretty good, although I think it could use a little more variety. In particular, I would love to see more Wayfinder skill variety. As for the bad, well, unfortunately, performance was pretty rough. I've got a pretty high-end rig, and even I struggled to maintain a consistent frame rate in the open world. The dungeons, it was much smoother, but while I was in the open zone play space, it was a little choppy. It was even worse for my friend who has a 2080, and he said he would go down into the teens. Like, the FPS drops were pretty substantial, and it was almost unplayable for him. So whatever the issues are, hopefully they can iron out performance before release. I also want to say that lots of the world felt a little stiff. This is a preview build, so there were things like T-posing NPCs and characters that kind of just felt like plopped in place. Obviously, the T-posing is going to be swapped out, but I do hope that they can add some more animation to the environment and the NPCs within it, because I did feel like a lot of it felt static, almost like I was walking through a diorama instead of like a living world. So I feel like they should do something to breathe a little more life into the game and just make it feel a little more alive. That would go a long way. I also really hope that they launch with more than just 2 open world zones. I hope I'm misunderstanding or was misinformed, and that they will be releasing with like 4 or 5. If not, I feel like some people are going to feel it's just not enough and there's not enough to this game, even with the fact that you are spending most of your time in the dungeons. It would be a shame if that is going to drag the game down. But overall though, yeah, I really like this game. I had a lot of fun, and I think it's got a ton of potential. So when are we going to be able to play it? They are looking to go into early access at some point in May. There will be playtests between now and then, and the game is slated for a full release later in this calendar year. Now remember, it is a free-to-play game, and with that they are going to have not only a cash shop, but also a season system. So they said the seasons will be released every 3 months, and with each season, they will be including a brand new Wayfinder, brand new weapons, as well as new open world events and dungeon challenges. Now, I do believe that they will occasionally, with these seasons, also be introducing new zones and new dungeon templates, or those dungeon locations that we talked about, but that is not going to be coming with every season. They have not said as much. It's not expected. I think Wayfinder is really cool. I really had a good time with it. I'm looking forward to playing more. It's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and it isn't a traditional MMO if we still want to argue about the genre classification of this game. But in my experience, it is nevertheless a fun loot game. It is a fun grinding game. If they can nail performance, if they can work on more combat variety, please, for the love of God, make it so that we don't just have those 4 skills. Make branching paths if you can. Whatever. I'm not a game developer, but man, it seems like a shame that there's 4 abilities that
I am. Please do that. It will be more fun.
Never change for our Wayfinders. Yeah, whatever. We're supposed to play different Wayfinders. I get it. What if I don't want to play different Wayfinders? Well, then the game's not for me. Anyways, that's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. It is very long, but I hope it was informative and helpful for you. I'm looking forward to Wayfinder. Can't wait to play. I'll see you guys later. Take it easy. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Chris. And like, this guy delivers every time. Every freaking time he delivers. I mean, this guy doing the great content. So, Wayfinder. We definitely will play it. 15th of August, like in the 7 days, we definitely will play it for a long time. I mean, for a long streams, but will it stay for long with us? I don't know. like week, 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it could be a really, really good game. Then we will see the end game. And why we do that? Because, you know, every 3 months the DLC, whatever, the progression, the battle passes, it's okay, but it's not a PvP game. It's not a Fortnite, it's not a Warzone, it's not even Diablo. So, you know, why should I play this for a longer time that I will at least cap the gear score? And then what? Let's see how it will be fun. We'll definitely try it, and, you know, subscribe, like if you want me to do that, and to be together in this community, in this channel, which is growing rapidly. Thank you for you guys. Like, we have already 1,182 of free subscribers. I mean, come on, 1,000 people. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time. It was a long one, I know that, but we're waiting for the Wayfinder, so we're preparing ourselves. It was nice to see you. Please check the channel of the Force Gaming. It's in the description, original video there, because the guy is doing great stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.